Welcome to our webcast for September. Over the next hour, we'll be talking about some trending topics about the abortion industry, but specifically Planned Parenthood. Please keep in mind that we'll be hearing from one past Planned Parenthood employee, but her experiences are not isolated ones. We also want you to remember that there are about 530 other abortion workers who have come through and then there were none pro-life outreach, just like Myra, who have had real stories, just like our founder and leader, Abby Johnson. Tonight, we're going to do this a little bit different. We'll do the intros, and then we're going to go straight into some court transcripts from a case where a former Planned Parenthood employee sued Planned Parenthood of Arizona for wrongful termination. Her name is Myra Rodriguez. As always, I want to make a statement and appeal from my heart to any abortion facility workers who may be watching this. Please know that we are here for you. There's no judgment here. We know that many of you had very similar reasons for starting to work at the clinic to help women, just like Myra, just like Abby. And we also know that that can also be your reason for leaving. So let me introduce you to Myra Rodriguez. Myra Rodriguez spent 17 years inside Planned Parenthood in Arizona, starting as a receptionist and working her way up to clinic manager. After managing a Title X location where no abortions were performed, Myra went on to manage 3 clinics, including the largest abortion facility in Arizona in the Glendale area. During her time at the Glendale facility, she witnessed physician malpractice, illegal conduct of a doctor, falsification of affidavits and patient records, and failure to report a minor who had an adult partner. After she began voicing her concerns, her superiors began giving her a really hard time about common, normal, daily stuff from other clinics. Following her complaints, she was terminated from her position in October of 2017. She decided to proceed with a wrongful termination lawsuit to clear her name, beginning an almost 2-year legal battle. But in August of 2019, Myra Rodriguez was awarded $3 million and won her case against Planned Parenthood.
Good, Brandy. Well, you were there on the first day, so you saw me how I was. It's been 2 years. We started this lawsuit on October 31st of 2017. So it's been quite a journey for me, and obviously that result at the jury anonymously agreeing with me was amazing.
While Myra was pursuing this suit against Planned Parenthood, she was an undocumented immigrant, and Planned Parenthood used that against her. But since that time, Myra has gotten married, and she has begun the process of documentation. Planned Parenthood wrongfully terminated Myra, and that was proven, as you'll hear tonight. They also planted narcotics in her desk, as you'll hear tonight. And we're going to highlight some of all of this through the court transcripts. You'll see snippets of those transcripts on the screen tonight. But first, Myra really wanted to share something very personal with our audience.
So this is the Divine Mercy. I don't know how many of you are Catholic, but the Divine Mercy, it's an image of Jesus. And it says, Jesus, I trust in you. And the detail about it, or the story about it, is that the day I got fired, I had found this card in my old office of the location I was closing down. And I carried this with me into that meeting when I was let go. And since that day, there's not been a day in my life that I've been away from that card. And every time I have a hard time, every time I feel that I can go through it with it, I looked at it and I said, Jesus, I trust you.
Thank you so much, Myra. So now we're going to move right on into the transcripts, and Myra's going to set these up for us.
I can see it there, yes.
Okay.
So this slide right here is about Tim Casey, my attorney, asking Brian Howard, the CEO of Planned Parenthood Arizona, about some of the documents about the the doctor's incident. So basically what he was telling him is to notice that even though Dr. Richardson wasn't the doctor performing most abortions, is Dr. Beck, Dr. Richardson had more incidents than any other doctor. And he was asking him if he knew who supervises Dr. Richardson. And he said that it was the board member's job, like he had some people on the board that will supervise him. But then as you can hear here, he says how the board has never reviewed. He says the board wouldn't probably review information in this granular detail.
Right. So basically, not sure what's going on here, out of our hands.
Well, no, because according to him, he had never seen this. He says I had him, but it's information he had access to, but he had never seen it.
Okay. All right. So starting with this one, would you mind reading this one to us first so that they don't have to deal with my echo, and then explaining it to us?
Sure. So this is an interview of Diane Harnage. She was the human resources coordinator. My attorney, Tim Casey, asked, was a background check conducted on her by, and she says, I don't remember. Okay. Do you know if you did anything to determine her eligibility, whether it was paper submission in 2003, some federal agency, or whether there was an electronic system, whether it existed or not? Did you do anything to determine her eligibility for employment? And she says, not that I recall, besides accepting her documents. And he says, thank you.
Okay. And it's really interesting, of course, because you offered quite a bit of information to her. But there were more than just you that were working there that were undocumented, accurate?
Correct. So when I got hired, I had to bring my credentials from Mexico and even my subjects and grades. And actually, it was a former employee, good friend of mine, that was already working in there in the same situation I was. And that's how I came across that I was going to be able to work for them in my situation, because she was already there and she said they don't mind. So
Okay.
now the next slide, it's about Tim Casey, my attorney, interviewing Elizabeth Ibarra. Elizabeth Ibarra, a little bit of the history for her. She was my immediate supervisor in July of 2017, right before I was let go. She was appointed as my direct supervisor, and she has also the really good detail about her is that she is Dr. Richardson's right hand. For the last 20 some years of their lives, they've been working together in his private practice. And when they came on board to Planned Parenthood, they're best friends. They work together all the time, and they've been together for a very long time. So Tim Casey asked her, okay, so, and again, you were told exactly to do what by Dr. Richardson. So this is the part where she admits that they took the narcotics that they found on my desk and drove them to another location without DEA's permission, without proper documentation, without being a licensed professional that is supposed to handle those narcotics. So Tim Casey asked, so do you exactly to do by Dr. Richardson? She said, yes. And you agree with me that Dr. Richardson, the medical director, was telling you to violate the controlled substance policy of Planned Parenthood, was he not? She said he was. It was either leave them where anyone could get them, or take them to the facility where it could be locked up. It was either one. Were you ever disciplined at Planned Parenthood for what you did that day? And she says no.
Which is kind of unreal. It's very much a double standard. Accurate?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so set up this next slide for us. What's going on here?
So on this slide is Tim Casey asking Mia Goldstein. Mia Goldstein is the original HR person that hired me back in 2000. And he asked her, I'm going to see if I can just get a yes or not from you. And it's first, did you conduct a background check on Mayra Rodriguez in the year 2000? And she responds, she was hired for receptionist. So again, it wasn't required as a requirement of seeing patients. Being in a patient setting that she would have had a background check. they were quite costly to Planned Parenthood, so it wasn't something that was formally done for every individual unless it was going to be in patient settings. So no. And I don't believe that any document was in the employment file that that was presented. So that's what she responded. So basically, they hired me. First, when I went there, it was to see a job for the clinic. And then when they hired me, they had me cover the reception desk for 2 weeks. Then they moved me to the clinic.
Wow, that was kind of a bait and switch. Okay. All right, so Tim is asking some questions here of Mia again. Can you set this one up for us?
Sure. So Tim is asking Mia about the questions, asking her again. So if there was any kind of system. So he says, I apologize because I probably didn't ask the question very well. You know that when you were as an HR assistant, that there were a predecessor to a E-Verify, where you could determine an employee's eligibility to work, true or false. She says, I don't recall. Could you tell the jury, assuming that there was, whether you did check Myers' eligibility for employment? And she says, I checked Myers' eligibility for employment by accepting whatever documents that she had presented to me on that day, and I onboarded her, which would have been her date of hire. That is what I did to fulfill my requirements that I was instructed on the day. Did I go any further than that besides entering her name to the EDP possibly on that date? Not true that I recall. That is the honest truth.
And how thankful we are that she told the honest truth at that point and felt the need, right, to
Yes.
publicize that. But again, there were 5 other people that this has happened with, so this wasn't a unique case in your situation.
Yes. She testified, that actually, yes, she was undocumented and hired too before that, and they knew. And there were other employees, other 5 employees that I know, that were in the same situation.
Right. Okay. And from what you were talking about, and we've talked about this earlier, is that like you gave them an abundance of information, of documents, right?
Yes, because they requested to see all my transcripts from school to make sure that what I've learned in school in Mexico will match close enough to be an MA. So in Mexico, I graduated as a medical lab technician. So it's close enough to like phlebotomy and stuff like that. So they wanted to see if my transcripts, so as you know, hardly any employer requests to see your transcripts. So they requested to see my transcripts, and I brought all my transcripts. I brought all my credentials from Mexico. And, she did ask me, why is everything from Mexico? And I said, I'm Mexican.
Right.
And then she's like, oh, just like Marlene? I said, yeah, just like Marlene.
And then the questions stop, right? Like, okay, I hear you, but we're not going to go any further with this.
She said, no problem. Don't worry about that. We don't mind. We don't worry about that, she said.
And again, if this was just you, people might say, oh, come on, Myra. But you have 5 other people, right, that this happened with. So
that I know.
That you're aware of.
That I was aware of, yes.
Right. So they had no problem hiring you as an undocumented.
No.
Right? Okay. All right. Can you set this one up for us, please?
Sure. So during the time Planned Parenthood, have there been decisions? So this is Tim Casey asking me, if there had been other times that I've known there have been complaints about doctors in the building acting inappropriately or doing something illegal or malpracticing and then he says, during your time at Planned Parenthood, had there been occasions with your knowledge about whether there had been problems or issues with doctors that have been reported either to the Federation or management to local Planned Parenthood in which those doctors were taken care of either through discipline or removal? And I said, yes, multiple times. And he says, do you remember those occasions? And I said, yes, I remember 3 of them specifically.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. So, listen as Myra shares about these 3 incidents that she witnessed.
Correct. So there were 3 doctors. I remember one of them, he wasn't performing the aspirations appropriately. So the federation, they reached out to the Planned Parenthood Federation, and the federation sent a doctor to retrain him. And then there was another time where a doctor was behaving inappropriately right before surgery, and we will talk about it more in another slide. There's more specifics about it. And then when they found out, they fired him. And then there was a doctor that was just too old and he had too many incidents, and staff complained about him falling asleep during surgery. Right, so here's Tim Casey asking me about the health department inspector that will come to the clinics to review the clinics, and my relationship with her, to explain what I did, what I had signed in a document. We'll see that on another slide, about the narcotics. And he says, how frequently or how often will this woman from the Arizona Health Department conduct checks? And I said, at the contraceptive clinic, which is a non-abortion clinic, she will go once a year or maybe every 2 years if it was due for inspection. But the abortion locations, the health department could just pay surprise visits. They in the state of Arizona, they can choose to go whenever they want to. Now,
Right.
in my time there, I can tell you that I never had a surprise visit from the health department in the abortion clinic at Glendale or at Flagstaff. They were always, inspections were always like, oh, your inspection is due around April, so you knew that around April, maybe March, maybe May, never after, but maybe March or April, they will do to come.
So, Myra, you actually built a relationship with this woman, with this inspector from the health department. Is that correct?
Well, correct, yes, because she has been the inspector assigned to Planned Parenthood for a long time, and I've been managing the clinics for a long time, so she'll be the same inspector. So she will come, and I knew what she would look for, and I knew what she will really mind,
Right.
Right, so this is talking again about the inspector. So Tim's asking me about her, and I said she had been there once in November when I first started managing the Glendale location. We're referring to November of 2016, and she was there on my first week. So he says, help us understand, why were you concerned? If this is August, she's only been there once. Why write this and expire? And he's talking about a log that they used that I wrote on the log for the narcotics, that those drugs were expired to be disposed. And I said, because when she was in November of 2016, she came by, it had been my first week, and she was very unhappy with how things were at the clinic. And she had made her point to tell us that she was coming back sooner than in a year. So what she found out in that inspection on November of 2016, she wasn't happy about it. She was told that I was taking over, and she said, okay, I will give you time to clean this up, and I'll be back sooner than a year. Like, she told us that it wouldn't take a full year for her to come back. So I was concerned that she will pop in. So I had, there were some expired narcotics, so I had put on the log that we acknowledged they had been there and expired, but those were narcotics I never touched. On this slide again, it's Tim Casey interviewing me, and it says, at any time before the meeting, did Mr. Washington, James Washington, the VP of Patient Services, was my supervisor up until July of 2017. And did Mr. Washington ever tell you that while you were supervising you in the time period of November of 2016 until June of 30th of 2017, that you had any performance problems? And I said, never. And I mean, he had just sent me to Washington, D.C. to meet Cecile Richards. Back in March of 2017, I was sent as a delegate to stand up in Congress and speak to congressmen and congresswomen about Planned Parenthood. And this is me and Cecile Richards. I got to meet her. So when Tim Casey asked me that, I said, I wouldn't imagine I'm doing a bad job if I'm being sent away in March with everything paid for to stay at a nice hotel and be in Washington, D.C. for 3 days, you know?
That doesn't sound like a troubled employee to me.
Correct. I mean, I wouldn't send the employee that's having a hard time or doing something wrong away in a trip like that.
Right.
Would you?
Right.
Now on this page, it will say Tim Casey again with me, and it says, now I'm sure the defense counsel is going to show you a series of emails that he went through with one of the other witnesses, but did you ever receive an email that you thought was putting you on notice that you have a problem that you had to work on? So this comes on because right before I was fired, 2 weeks before I was fired, it was September 22nd, I was given a write-up with naming, I think, at least 12 huge problems that I was having as a manager. So I disputed that. And as a proof, they brought a bunch of emails that I said no. And he said, okay, was there anything out of the ordinary other than routine custom type of customary types of office emails that you received? And I said, no, it was just stuff that you will get at the end of the day from your supervisor. So it was emails like, oh, don't forget to have your staff do this. Don't forget that we're supposed to do this from now on, you know. But it was emails that she will send all her managers from all the other clinics too. And actually, Elizabeth Ibarra actually testified to that same thing too. She said, I send her emails routinely like I will do any other managers. In case it to me again, he says, this is asking me what I thought that I noticed having problems with Dr. Richardson at the clinic and keeping records for my support conclusion. So what he meant is that, so I start managing the Glendale location in November of 2016. Dr. Richardson started coming over to see patients there in January of 2017. At first, I noticed that he worked a bit different than other doctors, but I was barely getting to know the clinic and the staff, you know, and time goes by. It's when I say, yeah, so I took over Glendale in November. I believe he started coming over after January 17, once a month. So first this time, second month, by March, April, I started noticing that patients had more complications. And in May, it kept on. Patients had more bleeding, more heavy bleeding. Nurse practitioners on call will complain. So there's nurse practitioners on call for after hours. And that's when patients can call when the clinics are closed down. And if they're having excessive bleeding or fever, and we will give them the rundown of the day so they will be aware of the calls they may have coming. And a lot of them, they're coming, I will call them and be like, so this is going on for today. This is what the patients we had. Watch out for this. You may get a call for this. And they will be, who was the doctor? And then as soon as I say it was Dr. Richardson, comments will be like, great, I'm not gonna have any sleep. So on this page is Tim Casey asking me about the meeting where I was let go. So remember, they gave me the write-up on September 22nd, and I had, I asked on September 22nd, I refused to sign it. I said, I don't agree with this, and I want time to dispute. And they said, okay, so we'll meet up again on October 3rd, and I'll work on my dispute as I was closing down the Northeast Phoenix location. So it says, okay, now you go into the meeting and who's there? And I said, Tiffany Tillotson, James Washington, and Elizabeth Ibarra. He says, okay, and tell us what happened at the start of the meeting. I said, I walk on, and I said my big old package on the table, and I said I had prepared a response, bullet to bullet, and I have emails to prove and back up that information. And I started discussing what I think was not fair, and I told them that I had dropped on Brian Howard's desk a response. And he said, I'm sorry, and I said, I dropped a copy of the 75-page response to Brian Howard's desk before walking into the meeting. So Brian Howard is who at Planned Parenthood, he says, and I said, he's the CEO. So I drop off a packet, a 75-page packet to Brian Howard with a note that says, this is to prove to you that this write-up was a setup because I've been complaining about the doctors. Correct. But don't forget that I haven't been in that office for a week.
Right.
They
You hadn't
found
even,
the narcotics in my desk on a Friday when I hadn't even been working in that week. So another, Elizabeth Ibarra and another manager from Tempe had been using the clinic. Elizabeth Ibarra was supervising in my spot because I was away packing up Northeast Phoenix. And the Tempe manager was working from there because the Tempe location had been closed down. So remember, that week I wasn't there at all.
and other people had been in your desk that day too, right? They were looking for keys for the
The
POC.
entire week. Yes, yeah. Other people had been the entire week using my office, looking for keys, placing stuff in my desk. So yes.
Right.
All right. So here's him, Tim Casey and Myra Rodriguez. He's asking me about if I had any problems with Planned Parenthood. Do you want me to read it, or would you
Yeah.
like to?
Read this one exactly as it is because it's a gut punch.
So he said, before you were fired, did you have any problems with Planned Parenthood? I said, never. You believe in their mission? I said, yes. You had no axe to grind with them? I said, no. He says, tell them why. Why have you filed? Why did you hire a lawyer to file this lawsuit? And I said, I don't want them to ever do this to anybody else ever again. It is not fair. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's all
It's
right.
not fair that you're not allowed to even defend yourself or talk about it. It's not fair. You know, I wasn't even given the chance to defend myself in that meeting. And it's not fair that they do this to people over and over and over again.
Myra, do you feel that Planned Parenthood used your undocumented status to hold that over your head?
Yes, they did. I mean, we don't have that slide, but it's one of the things that their lawyer kept using and using every time during my time in court. Like when I set up in that chair to be interviewed, they keep using and using and using my status and calling me a liar.
So I want to warn our audience a little bit. The content that we're about to dive into on this next slide is difficult. There were people who were taken advantage of, so please brace yourself for what Myra is getting ready to share with you.
So Tim Casey asked her, I don't have the name, but there was a doctor who apparently, then my client testified to the jury that was watching inappropriate items on a remote device before conducting surgeries and may have been touching patients. Do you remember anything like this? She says, I don't remember a doctor touching patients inappropriately. Do you ever remember? And she says, but I do remember a doctor who was looking at inappropriate material on his, and were you involved in that? He was terminated, she said. Were you involved in the investigating on that? IT was, and I know the facts, yes. Okay, and the investigation, it sounds like there was an investigation of the computer because he was using a work computer to look at the inappropriate materials. And she says, correct.
Right before he would go into procedures. Accurate?
Right before he will walk into the room to see the female patients for their surgical abortion.
While they were under anesthesia.
Correct. And the complaint from staff was, I wasn't present at the clinic, but the complaint was that the first thing the doctor does before starting surgery is do a breast exam and listen to their heart.
We don't want you all to forget that you can find reports on other abortion facilities in your local community by going to checkmyclinic.org. That's a comprehensive database of inspection reports for abortion facilities. Checkmyclinic.org.
Okay.
Now on this page is Tim Casey. He says to James Washington, when Ms. Rodriguez was moved and promoted to the center manager position. So I was managing a Title X clinic, and then on January of 2016, I was asked to supervise the Flagstaff location. Then that same year, it's when I got the Employee of the Year award on September of 2016. On October of 2016, I had been requested to be promoted to the Glendale location. Now, Glendale is the largest abortion facility in the state of Arizona from any abortion provider. They do more abortions than any other abortion doctor in the state of Arizona. and they promoted me to that. And he did that with any formal, there was no training done. This is what James Washington responds. No, in the sense that based on, as you saw on her application, she was fully trained. You know, that was the advantage of hiring Myra. It was hit the ground running with the minimal time to bring her up to speed, and she had already been trained. So what he meant is that because I had been there for so many years, even though I never managed an abortion clinic before, you know, they didn't have to train me on all the other Planned Parenthood things. When Tim Casey, my attorney, talks to James Washington, the VP of Patient Services, remember he is my supervisor up until July of 2017. And he says, well, it's in the context of Exhibit 65 and 64. The jury has also seen some other documents yesterday. But you will agree with me, based on your knowledge, that although Dr. Richardson is number 2 in the number of abortion surgeries he performed, he accounts for nearly 50% of all Planned Parenthood statewide complications. Does he not? And again, we're talking about that pie chart that we asked Brian Howard on the first slide. So the pie chart had 4 doctors, and Dr. Richardson accounts for almost 50%, and the other 4 are the other 50% of the complication. So this is what James Washington replies. He says that's a difficult to slice, you know. It could be. It depends on the complications, you know. It depends if you are aggregating complications, medication, abortion, surgical reporting. It could be. It could be just about. It could be how many times he takes for lunch, you know. It just. And then Tim Casey says, I mean, if Myra was on this blue deficiency, she will be fired, wouldn't she?
And what happens there? What does the Planned Parenthood attorney do at this point?
He objects to that question.
Of course he does, right? Because the whole premise of you being fired as a whistleblower is the fact that you spoke up against Dr. Richardson, right? Like you said, that this is not okay. All of the complications, all of the complaints. There were even times that he was having you or attempting to have you sign off on things before procedures were even done. Accurate?
Correct. Like one of my complaints was there was an affidavit form signing the state of Arizona requirement from the state implemented in June of 2017. I was part of the meeting, the original meeting with the health department. I was told by the health department on what process of the abortion did the doctor and the staff have to sign, and they were very specific. Abortion, and I'm sorry to be so graphic, abortion is done on patient, aspiration is terminated, remains are taken out to be checked, and the staff at that moment, after checking the human remains, are to sign the paper, you know, and that's what he was doing before. And there's actually on the trial, on the transcript, one of the exhibits, it's an email from him in my response of how I didn't agree of the time he was signing it. And I said, well, here at Glenn, they were signed that after the human remains, the POCs, we call that in that email, POCs have been checked. And he said he was doing it right before walking out of the room. So that means before he even goes to check on the remains. One of the things that my attorney, Tim Casey, asked him, he said, what other local manager did you have supervising 3 clinics? And his response was first regional manager. He's like, no, regional managers have managers in their clinics. Myra had a regional manager. And then he says, so what other local manager that doesn't have managers in clinics did you have supervising 3 clinics for the salary of 1? And he says, only Myra. This is again Tim Casey with James Washington. So he's talking about how they let Brian Howard know that I'm being fired, you know, and he brought this up because, I mean, usually when you're about to fire a manager, you don't let the CEO know, you know, you fire them. So my attorney wanted to bring this up because it was like, why do you have to call the CEO to tell him you're firing Myra?
Or
So
was
at
there
some
something,
point,
or was
uh-huh.
there something more that was being planned, right?
Right. So at some point I texted Brian Howard. I just wanted Mr. Howard to know what's going on. When did you texted Mr. Howard? Were you requesting his approval? He says, no. I was letting him know that was going on, that was going to take place, just as heads up. Mr. Howard, was he involved in the decision to terminate Ms. Rodriguez? No, it was simply a courtesy. Did he respond? He did. He did. Do you remember what his response was? I think it's something like, I'm sorry to hear that, but we need to do what's best for the organization, something to that extent. Do you have a clear recollection of that? You know, I don't have an exact same text message, but it was to that understanding that we need to do what's best for the organization. What's best for the organization is to get rid of the one complaining.
Myra, what's it like now being on this side of things? And what sort of impact do you hope to have on other people who are working in the abortion industry or just the public in general?
You guys have done for me, you know, the support, being there. You know, I always tell people I've lost a lot of people along the way because they turned their back on me. And then God has given me all these many people, multiplying all the people that I lost in my life, you know, that didn't want nothing to do with me because I went against Planned Parenthood. But now, you know, I encounter a formal managers from that specific location in the last few weeks, you know, randomly, like one of them manages a big old practice and I randomly came across him and he said, thank you for doing that, you know. And then I saw a nurse, she used to be a PA and they treated her very poorly, and I saw her too and she said, thank you, Myra, thank you, like, thank you for doing that for the rest of us, you know. So I'm bringing this up because that's what I want. I want other employees, you know. What I did was not other employee should feel that their job could be lost if they see something wrong and they talk about it. That's not right. That should be the opposite. Those people should be rewarded for bringing up wrong stuff happening. Just like if you see a crime and you call the police, you are not harassed by the police for complaining of a crime. You're actually praised by the police for doing so. You know, because that's what this society needs. It needs people that complain where wrong things are being done. Especially, you know, I worked for Planned Parenthood for 17 years because I care for women. I care for their safety. You know, I want them to be safe. And it is one of the things that didn't happen. So yes, I take it personal that the care of women, it's been at stake when you have a doctor like that working. You know, that your job is to deliver, your promise to those women is to deliver quality health care.
Absolutely.
But then again, we're here because I complain about that quality not being great quality. There's not quality.
And a jury unanimously agreed with that, right?
Yeah.
Like you didn't have you didn't even actually have to have all of the jurors come back and say this, right? Like what was it, 8 had to agree? Is that how that went?
Well, no, actually, it was unanimously. It was actually at the end of the case, it was decided that all 10 will participate in the decision. So all 10 of them participate in the decision, and at the end of the case, it was unanimous. So that's when they decided. Don't forget, 8 of them were pro-choice.
We want to end the webcast by saying that Myra never actually asked for a dollar amount in this case. It was a jury that decided that she should be awarded $3 million, a jury that was predominantly pro-choice. But they saw through the lies and they saw how she was wrongfully treated. If you work in the abortion industry and you want help to get out, know that we are here for you. You can call us at 888-570-5501 or reach out to us on our website, abortionworker.com. Our help is free and it's confidential. If you would like to support the work of And Then There Were None, you can do so by going to our website, abortionworker.com, and click on the Donate tab.